Hey, good morning, everybody. I hope you had a nice weekend and got out and enjoyed some fresh air, at least yesterday. Really feel excited this morning because we have a very special guest. Her name is Jennifer Allison, and she is a fashion and footwear designer, maker, artist, and educator. She graduated from Ryerson University Fashion Design Program, has had an opportunity to live, work throughout Canada, United States, South America, Europe, and Asia, fine-tuning her craft while gaining industry experience, designing for various companies such as Aldo, Abercrombie and Fitch, Awamaki, I hope I'm saying that right, Pour la Victoire, in addition to several other private labels. Her designs have been featured in publications such as Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, In Style, Elle, and Flair magazine, to name a few, and have been worn by reputable icons such as Cameron Diaz, and I like her so much, Anne Hathaway, Blake Lively, and Rihanna. In 2014, Jennifer launched the Art and Soul Academy as a way to share her love for design, traditional craft, and the slow fashion movement. After operating Art and Soul out of Toronto for 5 successful years, Jennifer made the decision to return to her roots, and in March 2020, relocated the studio to her hometown, North Bay, Ontario, just in time for COVID. Right, Jennifer?
Exactly. 5 days before the whole announcement that our world was going to change. So perfect timing.
Wow. Well, we want to say welcome. I'm glad you came back. So,
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. Yeah.
So Jennifer's located, just so that you know, on Algonquin in Maine, right? And it's Art and Soul Academy. And she's just, as she's been, had the courage to do this through COVID. And I guess you're looking forward to the day that the doors are fully open, eh, Jennifer? And is that today?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Today was is good news, right? I feel like it's one more step forward. And yeah, opportunities like this are just such a blessing because having moved right at the beginning of lockdown, not a lot of people knew I was back and have been able to experience the studio. So I'm hoping as of today, I can really start picking up the momentum and yeah, just share my story with you guys today because that's a few more beautiful faces that know that I'm here and know what or will learn about Art and Soul. So
And
really
I think, and Jennifer, when we went to see Vanessa Tignanelli's exhibit, the other artist on exhibit there was Jennifer. So she's multi-talented. She's got lots going on. And I think she said to me that she's going to still have the academy, but also have a retail outlet as well. So, and you can actually, if you want to make your own leather crafts, you can do that with Jennifer, and we'll learn more about that as we get into the conversation. Do you want people to ask questions as we go along, Jennifer, or how would you like to do this?
So I've prepared a slideshow with lots of visuals to hopefully keep it as interesting as possible. So you're welcome to pop in with any questions as I go or save them till the end. Yeah, don't worry about interrupting me. So whatever feels natural and comfortable.
Okay, so away you go.
All right, so I'm just going to share my screen here, and I've got a little something to share with you guys. Here we go. We'll
There we are.
Play slides, play slideshow. There we go. So first of all, yeah, thank you so much for inviting me this morning. It's, very grateful to be able to share the Art and Soul story. It's been a roller coaster ride. And I'd like to just this morning share kind of the highs, lows, and lessons I've learned along the way to date. And then share all the exciting things to come moving forward. So if you haven't heard of Art and Soul, it's kind of a play on words, and we're a DIY studio devoted to design-driven dreamers. Now, what does that mean? So essentially, as Harriet mentioned, the studio was founded in 2014 in Toronto. And at the time, we were the first full-time school in Canada to offer classes, courses, and consulting for the art of shoemaking, in addition to leathercraft. Now, we offer a wide range of courses. So whether you're a hobbyist looking to try something new, simply want to unplug, come on out with friends, or more serious about the industry and looking to build your portfolio or get into the industry, we have a little something for everybody. Now, the initial goal was to make this craft accessible to a general audience. A lot of people can't really picture how footwear in particular is made. I think all of us, and probably most of you, have had some sewing experience, but very few people have made a pair of shoes in their past. And it's kind of a three-dimensional product, so it's a little tricky to visualize how you can make something so 3D and sculpture-like. And there's a lot of different steps to it, but it's actually not as tricky as people might think. And even though the industry as a whole has moved to big mass production process, my goal has been to kind of bring it back to the roots of the craft, but with a modern twist. Now, over the years, the studio has grown into so much more. It really is a place where people can connect, create, and collaborate. And it has attracted people from all over the globe, to my surprise. We have had people from all over Canada come take our classes, in addition to Australia, Europe, and all over the US. So it really has grown in and turned into this big, beautiful, I usually call it a monster, which is sometimes good and bad. Now, how does one even get into shoemaking? I know most people will consider it a lost art, and it still is quite a bit of ways to go to be considered a commercial modern art. But yeah, I had been sewing since I was 6 years old. As Harriet mentioned, I was born and raised in North Bay, and I grew up taking sewing classes. Here is a photo of me when I was 8 years old, holding my first sewing project. So, it's kind of fun to just see and always look back. I love this quote where it says, "Once upon a time, you were a little girl with big dreams that you promised you would make real one day. So don't disappoint yourself." So that quote kind of gives me chills, because looking back, growing up, I never really felt comfortable in my own skin. I was pretty shy as a child growing up throughout my entire early school days. And what I realized is sewing did become my superpower, because it became something that I latched onto, that I was really good at, that ended up really helping build my self-confidence and making me feel powerful, and gave me skills that, I could eventually develop and work towards, and had something to build upon. In addition to sewing, I was also a figure skater, a competitive figure skater, and ended up kind of merging those two worlds. I used to make my own skating dresses as a kid, and then a lot of my friends loved what I was making. So their parents ended up starting to hire me to make their competition dresses, and I would take it really seriously. I would bring them to Fabricland. We would listen to their music, and I would make little mood boards to kind of get the essence of the dress or the costume they wanted to wear. So right from an early age, I always kind of knew I wanted to work in fashion, but I didn't really know how one would go about that. But continuing into high school, I kept sewing, and I decided to start building pieces that would eventually go into my portfolio to apply to Ryerson, the Ryerson Fashion Design Program, which was in Toronto. And luckily I got in, and those were 4 wonderful years, which then led to corporate design career, and then eventually running my own business. So I ended up stepping into the footwear industry unexpectedly because during Ryerson, I actually specialized in evening wear. So you can see here, these were pieces I created early in my career. My first love was apparel, and you can almost kind of see the skating influence. I'm a sucker for sequins and beads and anything with a sparkle that's pretty feminine, which is why I really loved the whole evening wear element. But to really make a go at evening wear, I found I would have had to specialize in bridal. And at that point in time, it wasn't really what I was looking to do. So instead, I started applying for corporate opportunities and fell into footwear with Aldo. Now, Aldo is based out of Montreal, and I didn't even know they were a Canadian company at the time. That's how much I, didn't know about footwear. But I initially applied with them for a footwear illustrator position. And then I quickly worked my way up the corporate ladder and became one of their lead head designers very early on. So I feel like my story is that kind of fake it till you make it with a lot of initiative along the way. So I am a very hard worker, pretty stubborn. I don't like to admit if I don't know something, which looking back, I wish I could tell my 20-year-old self that it is okay to ask questions, and that is kind of the time to learn and ask questions, and you're not expected to know everything. But I kind of would go into work every day and pretend I knew everything. And then it ended up becoming, a lot of homework in the evenings to do the research and look into all the aspects that I didn't know in that day to be able to do my job. So I would go in and my heart would be pounding, but somehow was able to pull it off. And these are just some visuals of some examples of some fun styles that did really well with the various companies I designed for. At that point in time, when icons such as Cameron Diaz and Rihanna and whoever was wearing my stuff, I was really living for that. That was giving me a lot of motivation to keep going, and was really a nice way to build my portfolio for future companies to come. Now, as grand as all that sounds, there was still a big void that I felt was lacking. I didn't quite feel like my lifestyle was in line with my values. I couldn't quite pinpoint it right then and there. But I knew that the fast fashion movement, something needed to change. So I had started researching what slow fashion was all about. And I realized that is kind of what I had been doing since I was 6 and 8 years old. I was really focusing on the process of making and enjoying the process and being very careful about my selection of materials and putting a lot of time and energy into something very special. So that whole quality over quantity, as opposed to keeping up with the trends just for the sake of keeping up for the trends, which I found was becoming a big portion of my job with all of the past companies I had worked for. So what is slow fashion? Slow fashion is essentially just the movement of designing, creating, or buying garments for quality over and longevity. So with slow fashion, it really does help reduce waste, save water, lower your carbon footprint, reduce exposure to toxic chemicals for the maker and the wearer, support fair wage and working conditions, support animal welfare because you're able to control your sourcing, support local and small business in terms of actual businesses or the suppliers, and then ultimately just save time and money and helps you really develop your own sense of style because you're being very selective and you're editing pieces that are truly you. And I think that is probably an element that a lot of us at some point in our life has gotten caught up with, where we feel overwhelmed with the amount that is in our closet or in our homes. We have a lot of trinkets, we have a lot of clothes in our closet, but we have nothing to wear. We want new things, but we only wear them a few times. And I think with age, you end up learning more about yourself, and you're able to start making better decisions, and you start learning, when we're applying this knowledge to clothing, what actually makes you feel comfortable. And you're not necessarily trying to look like everyone else. You're looking to develop your own uniform and essentially brand DNA, because we're all in this digital day and age our own brand. And what that means to me is not to create some sort of facade. It's truly to find a uniform that works for you and works for your lifestyle. So
Jennifer, I just want to add to our 41 members that Jennifer is an Earth and a Nest business now. She's registered with Earth and a Nest.
yeah, so excited to be a part of Earth and a Nest. And I think, yeah, with every company, we have the responsibility, any new brand, existing brand, we have the responsibility to acknowledge where we can improve, highlight what we are currently doing. And I think I have a lot of new clients that want to launch brands, and I think it's a really important thing that the world doesn't need another fashion footwear company, but we need companies that stand for something, that have a strong DNA, and that have initiatives that are really helping do better, and can bring their clients along for the ride, right? There's so much we can do, and as long as I think we're transparent, I think that's the main thing, is just doing the best you can in the moment and making those decisions as you go. So my way of, in the corporate world, I did feel trapped, and I didn't know how to get out of it. I was working in New York at the time, which was essentially, when I was 8 years old, my dream job. I always wanted to go work in New York, be a fashion designer. So why wasn't I happy? I was making great money, living, quote unquote, a dream life, or the American dream, right? So what's a girl to do? Well, essentially, she just packs everything up and she goes to Peru. And that's exactly what I did. I decided I just wanted to step away. I had a little bit of a financial cushion, so I didn't just quit everything and pick up and go. I did it in a way where it made sense to me. I knew I wanted to do a little bit of traveling. I had to step out of my element to kind of see what my next steps would be. And I had this organization on my radar for a while, and I had forgotten about it. So this organization was in Peru, and it was called Awamaki. So I decided to go and volunteer, because this organization worked with women's weaving cooperatives in the high Andes. So right in the rural mountains. You can see, here's a photo of myself in the middle of 2 Quechua women, doing what they do best, weaving and spinning their wool. They specialize in natural dyeing, all with very limited resources and with very humble settings. So a lot of these women, what I loved, were able to really intertwine their culture and their personality and their passion all into these beautiful textiles. And I just kind of had this aha moment of, that's what fashion is all about. And this is the ultimate slow fashion, because these are pieces that essentially last with them and within their families for years. They get passed down. I think some of you may have, items that were your parents or grandparents that you truly cherish. And I feel like now the younger generation isn't necessarily going to have those pieces, because we've all been shopping fast fashion, and items simply don't last as long as they once did. So this was kind of this really lovely moment where I was so amazed by what these women could do. There was no excuse. I think over here in Canada, it's easy to be like, I don't have enough table space to really work on that project. I don't have, the lighting's not quite right in my living room, or I don't want to like spread out in my living room and make a mess. Whereas these women were working in very humble huts, usually on the ground, just on sheepskin, of leis, and usually just by one single light source as soon as the evening turned dark. So it was a real wake-up call that, you know, you can literally get started at any point. And so with those women, just their willingness to share their knowledge, I took some workshops and was really fortunate to work one-on-one. And unfortunately, I don't speak Quechua, so they were able to, with a translator, I was able to work with them. And it was just so amazed that they were willing to share their knowledge, because I came from a corporate atmosphere that was very Devil Wears Prada. I don't know if you, any of you guys have seen that movie. If not, that's your homework for tonight. But it's a pretty cutthroat industry with very strong personalities. And that doesn't come naturally to me. I learned to hold my own, but I'm a pretty calm person. I truly just love fashion for the art of fashion. So to be this cutthroat business person did kind of go against the grain. And I learned how to hold my own out of necessity and survival. But it truly was, between that experience and then my experience in Peru, was what inspired Art and Soul. So the launch, how did I launch Art and Soul? Where did I even get started? How does one go about starting up a crazy business with the focus of Lost Art being the star product, right? Essentially, I took that idea of sharing knowledge and I thought, when I return to Canada, how can I share my skills with the community? And I thought back to my favorite days back in university when I was working in the labs. It was very collaborative. We would pull all-nighters and we'd all be making beautiful creative things, and you just felt the energy. And I wanted to create a space that reminded me of those days. So I thought of creating a studio, like I said early on in the presentation, where people could connect, create, and collaborate. So initially, rather than committing to a space and paying rent, I started off small. And this is truly a testament to just starting where you can, when, how you can. You don't need a ton of money. I don't even want to tell you how little money I had in my bank account because it's very embarrassing. But I started my website up in Peru with terrible Wi-Fi. I sourced everything before I flew back to Canada in Lima and brought everything back in my suitcases on my back to rent out space out of the Shoe Museum and out of a friend's vintage shop. So they were kind enough to give me table space and a room. And I had a website already made. I use Weebly, which is a wonderful template, easy breezy website server. I don't know how to code. I'm not a graphic designer. So it was very simple initially. And I ended up having people enroll before I had even come back to Canada. So my first workshop was out of my friend's vintage shop. The enrollment was full. That gave me some confidence and some momentum. And then I rented out Shoe Museum the following month. And these two opportunities gave me the confidence to find permanent studio space, which became Art and Soul Academy, and lived for 5 years in the East End of Toronto in the Leslieville neighborhood. And you can see this photo with the big windows was the former studio. I miss that lighting and high ceilings, but it was definitely, you know, time to leave after 5 years for multiple reasons. But essentially, like every neighborhood, it gets gentrified, and 2 Starbucks moved across the street from us. So I kind of knew that this building full of artists was essentially too good to be true, and that I was going to have to make some moves because our rent was going to be increased 60%, which didn't really feel feasible. And I had 2 months notice to make some decisions. Now, before I get into what the North Bay studio now looks like, I just want to show you a quick snippet of what a workshop at Art and Soul would look like. like I said, we have all walks of life who come through our studio doors with all skill levels. I have some people who have years of experience sewing, whether that's with garments or quilting, or have dabbled with leather. Some have zero. And either way, I love that, because if people come in with zero experience, I find in a way it's kind of easier because they just literally listen step by step and follow what I say. But then when people come in with an experience, it is kind of nice to have that conversation and kind of apply those two worlds. And sometimes, or more often than not, I will learn just as much from my students as they learn from me. So essentially the process goes like this. People will walk in with an idea. So whether you have this dream shoe, bag, belt, whatever it is in mind, you will come in with either a photo, a sketch, or an existing shoe that you want to remake because it was your favorite shoe or bag that you want to rebuild so it can live on. And then from there, we take measurements, we pair you up with a shoe form, which is called a last, which is these green shoe shapes here, to match your size. And we will actually draw in 3D and get the design made on 3D. And when you love the way it looks on these lasts, we will then bring it down and start making our paper pattern, so that we can cut out our leather and all the pieces involved. Now, we don't always just work with leather. We can work with fabric and a variety of materials. We do have a wide range of fabric and leather here in the studio, but people are always welcome to bring existing materials with them if they have a very specific idea in mind. From there, we move into the stitching. So you can see behind me, I just have domestic sewing machines that we tend to use 90% of the time. So that's one way of reducing the industrial equipment, is by swapping out needles. We can actually handle sewing through leather quite easily. But here pictured, I also have a post-bed industrial sewing machine, which we also use for the more heavy duty materials. So it all just depends on the idea you have when you come through the doors. From there, you can see number 5. Above the number 5, we have this kind of shoe-like photo, but that's what it looks like before it actually gets stretched around the form. So you do all of your sewing and then we stretch it with hammering and these lasting pliers, lots of nails. That's where you really feel like a shoemaker or a little cobbler elf. And then we start closing up our shoe with the leather and the soles to officially seal it up and make it complete. So that's a really kind of quick snapshot of what's involved. It really isn't as daunting as it may sound because we bite it off in small pieces and just take it one step at a time.
Can we stop for a moment, Jennifer, for questions? Because I
Sure.
think that everybody's pretty intrigued by this. Any questions?
Jennifer, where do you get your soles from?
So great question. So we primarily specialize in leather soles because we actually buy the sheeting that we then pre-cut ourselves. So footwear is a little tricky because it's a puzzle. So when you have the molds that are rubber or EVA that have more shape and a unit built into it, that's where you do kind of rely on a factory. So with the leather, we can build and stack the layers and build the proper heel height. But with that said, there are more suppliers popping up now that there are more schools like Art and Soul that are independent and kind of bringing back the craft. There are a few resources, and there's a supplier in Vancouver that offers the sneaker soles. So for a while we weren't able to offer sneaker making, but now we can because we have access to the soles. And then I used to work with quite a few factories in China, Italy, and Brazil. So luckily I've kept in touch with them. So moving forward, I'm really looking forward to bringing more of a retail component to Art and Soul. So all these parts and pieces are more customizable when you're in a workshop, but also easier for you to buy if you want to keep making at home afterwards. So I feel like things are starting to evolve and become more accessible, which then allows your creativity to run that much more wild.
Jennifer, can lasts be custom made? For example, if you have like an extra wide foot, or you have something that doesn't easily fit into like a regular size 9 or 10 or whatever, are they also custom made? Can they be?
Absolutely. So that's a great question, because feet are quite complicated, right? And over the years, so many of us have treated our feet so poorly just by making do with whatever we can find off the shelf. So luckily, there is a supplier in Stouffville that I work really closely with, who are now working with 3D printed lasts. And the owner, his name is Tazera, and him and I have worked really closely together over the years, because he actually has the traditional shoemaking knowledge. He's in his late 60s and was actually a technical designer for Jimmy Choo.
Oh,
Most know that brand. He won't tell people that. So I'm his PR girl, because I just think that's so impressive. And he's too humble, in my opinion. But he has that traditional knowledge, but also the interest to merge it with technology. And this whole 3D printing idea, I don't know if many of you know or have experienced it, witnessed it. It's fascinating, and it's really going to change this industry, because we're going to be able to start printing out components. So I don't see it as a printing out an entire shoe. I see it as printing out the core components, or even eventually the soles. And right now we can actually do the last. So by taking all of your measurements, and if you have 1 foot larger than the other, or bunions, or there's so many issues, I mean, the list goes on, we can actually customize the shoe forms so that you're already starting off with a guarantee that the last will fit you. So if anyone has concerns of, already having difficulty shopping off the shelf, I love having that conversation before someone even gets started, because it is an investment worth looking into, because then you're going to have something that fits. Like, I'm the first person to say your first pair of shoes will not be perfect. It's like anything you try for the first time. But if you have a last that will fit your foot, you're going to take that much care and, patience with the process. And even though that maybe the stitching might not be perfect, they will fit, and they will feel comfortable. And because we use natural materials, they will mold to you rather than you having to break in your shoe. So that's also the best part of using all natural leather in this case. And I know some people may not feel comfortable about buying raw hides. So my solution for that, and I have a few slides as an example shortly, is upcycling materials. So a lot of the time, if people don't want to go buy a raw animal hide, I say, okay, go to Value Village, buy an old leather jacket or an old vinyl jacket. And we've used skirts and pants and jackets and blouses that have beautiful embroidery and have cut them strategically to use that embroidery, or just use the jacket as a whole to turn it into rare boots or sneakers or flats. So really, like, the options and possibilities are endless. And I think it is a very technical thing. So when we can get that last, because the famous saying goes in the industry, the last comes first. So play on words. It is the most important ingredient. So that was an awesome question.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we keep going?
I don't have a question, but I would like to just mention that I had the wonderful opportunity to spend a bit of time in Peru about 7 or 8 years ago. And I did the Machu Picchu climb, and I spent a lot of time, we were there for 2 weeks, and we spent a lot of time visiting the little villages, and those pictures that you put up of Peru were exactly the kind of things that I saw all over the place. The women sitting in groups on the ground, doing the most amazing weaving. I spent hours and hours watching them. And at the end of the first week there, I actually got a pair of boots made for their handmade boots while we were there. And like I say, they were about 8 years ago that I got these made, and they are still like new, and they are still my absolute favorite pair of boots.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing those. Those are so fun. And I mean, like, is there a better souvenir than a pair of shoes when you can pick the textiles and then wear your souvenir after? I mean, that kind of puts keychains and postcards to shame, right?
Wow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I chose the material, you know, from a whole selection on the wall. And the funny part was we went in there, my husband and I, with our bag of laundry to get done. And it was while the wife was doing our laundry, the husband was making our boots. It was so great.
That's so Peru. Like, I love the combo of businesses, right? It's like, that's just exactly paints Peru in the perfect way. I'm so glad you were able to experience that. And I bet people comment every time you wear those. I bet you get a comment about your shoes.
Yeah, for sure.
Too fun. All right, so I'm going to keep going, but feel free to, shout as we go. So speaking of Peru, another thing that they do about or with their shoes, a lot of the traditional shoes, I wish I actually had a photo. And Debbie, you probably saw these, were the tire sandals. And they were the traditional sandals that a lot of the people in the communities wear. And there's different designs depending on the community you're from. And it's the same with their top hats. So that just reminded me, because this student spotlight that I'm pulling up right now was a woman who used recycled tires for the outsole of her boots. Now, her story is gives me chills to this day. Her name was Allison, and she, prior to signing up for a workshop, had been in a severe motorcycle accident in Toronto, just a block away from her home. She was at an intersection, and a car just kind of slid into her bike, and she had been in critical care for months, and then was going through rehabilitation programs, and then ended up reaching out to me because she actually, as a profession, was a bridal pattern maker, but was losing the mobility because she had rods in her wrist and her forearms. So she was trying to get creative and think of occupational therapy programs that would help her get back to the motion that she required for her day-to-day job as a pattern maker. So she stumbled across my workshops and had always wanted to make shoes. She's very creative and thought, hey, maybe I can get these courses expensed and use it as a rehabilitation, but also learn a new skill at the same time. So believe it or not, she actually came to me wanting to make a pair of motorcycle boots because she was not afraid to get back on her bike, which blows my mind. And she was determined to make a pair of motorcycle boots so she could do a road trip when she's fully recovered in the US. And this is her wearing her new pair of boots that she made on her bike in the US, made from premium leather, exactly the way she wanted. So she did this kind of funny toe detail, but it's to protect the boot because that's kind of where it gets a lot of wear and tear when you're on your bike. And you can see the bottom right photo is her in the process of making. So the process does involve a lot of stretching and nailing. So it really did help her build up strength in her wrist and forearms. And by the time she was done with me, she ended up taking a group workshop and then eventually an intensive to make these pair of boots. So I knew her over a span of 2.5 years. She was more or less fully recovered. And it was just the most inspiring story. I couldn't believe the bravery and then also just the talent that came out of her. So that's one pretty special example of what people have done. And I'm highlighting women in particular because I feel like this is an industry that has been dominated by males for way too long. Our clientele, I would say, is 70% women, 30% men. Initially, because when I started the studio, I didn't have the full range of lasts in men's sizes in addition to women's. I prioritized women, and then as I grew and more funds were accessible, I started offering men's as well. But you can see here is another student. This was Andre. She was the woman who took an old denier leather jacket, and you can see is wearing the jacket with all the pattern pieces traced out on it. I think that kind of looks cool just as is. But we then cut into it, and then you can see on the side here, she had zero sewing experience, believe it or not. And I was joking with her that most people's first sewing project are like PJ pants or a pillowcase. And she decided to make a leather pair of cowboy inspired python boots with a removable harness and a zipper. So if any of you guys are sewists, most people are fearful of zippers and working with leather, and then just tackling a whole 3-dimensional craft blows my mind. I think she just had the perfect, like, let's do it, let's try mentality. And she was pretty particular and precise. So I'm just, again, blown away by this project. And then another fun one, Adrienne. So Adrienne was a costume designer and had worked in New York. Her and I had similar backgrounds. Like, we both left the industry and was kind of, looking for our next steps. And she came to one of my baby shoe workshops because she was a new mom. And her parents had purchased it just so she could have the day to herself. She made a little pair of baby shoes, and then that ended up inspiring her to start up her own business. So her business is called Brave New Souls, and she has continued that whole upcycling movement and uses leather scraps that are either donated or sourced on her end to make baby shoes. And she's expanded into toddlers and kids, but the baby shoe concept was the most brilliant business startup idea, because you need very limited amount of material, and the whole scrap concept was fun. And with baby shoes, you can do any combo of colors, like the more random, the better, and the cuter, anything that small is pretty adorable. So using offcuts, whether, the right foot matches the left, it doesn't really matter. So her company is doing really well. Once again, it's called Brave New Souls. I should have written that out there. But she has a great Instagram and a website. I believe she sells on Etsy, and has 2 children now. So she was lucky to have 2 little baby fit models when she was starting her company. And has just done really well. So again, really fun stuff and creative ideas. Now, here's just a few other kind of examples of just variety of styles that are possible. So really anything is possible depending on the time frame you are able to commit to the craft. So we have some people who have mixed leather and fabric in a fun pair of Oxfords. We have like these fun rainbow straps, but then we also have classic ballerina flats. So you can go quirky, you can go classic, you can add embellishments. Honestly, anything goes. If anything, I probably give you guys too much creative freedom, but I kind of believe that if you're really motivated to wear the product, you're probably going to be more likely to do a good job. Like I said, will it be perfect? Probably not. But if you have a little blip or bloop there, to me, I joke that that's what makes it bespoke. And also, it's not like a focal point. They're on the ground. Think of how we actually treat our shoes on a daily basis. You kind of get over that whole precious factor quite quickly once you start wearing them. And then you have the confidence that you can remake them if you need to. Now, I know I've talked mostly about shoes because that is obviously our star product, but shoes and bags and accessories all go hand in hand and are very similar and require similar materials and equipment. So these are just some handbags that people have made. that either they've come in simply for handbags or who have decided to pair it with a pair of shoes. And then here are just some leather goods that people have done as well. So not all projects require sewing machines. A lot of these have been hand stitched, which is also nice. So that's more the leather craft side of things, where you're doing saddle stitching and going one by one. Definitely takes more time, but is pretty satisfying if you like that sort of thing. I find it's pretty meditative. Now, as Harriet mentioned, I moved back to North Bay 5 days or so prior to the pandemic. So what on earth have I been doing since? Essentially just trying to keep this business going. I am happy that the studio is still standing. There are a ton of plans that I have been plugging slowly away at. And I am really looking forward to having Art and Soul not just be a school moving forward, but have more of a retail component. So what does that mean? Essentially, I'm working on creating kits. So everything that I have been teaching up to this point, I am looking to turn into a kit that will be available in a box and accessible for people to make at home. So I think this pandemic has really highlighted big issues in our world where accessibility is a major factor. And I already knew moving to North Bay, my main clientele or initial clientele wouldn't necessarily all be willing to travel. That was a big inspiration, was eventually to offer retreats up north and promote Northern Ontario and have people come, either spend a weekend or a week-long vacation where they spend the day with me and then put them in contact with local businesses and excursions to truly have an escape. But not everybody's able to do that, right? Able to afford it or take the time. So I really believe in these kits, and they're going to be the main focus moving forward. And I think just the pandemic's shown that when you rely on one source of income, it can really kind of bite you in the butt. I know the kits and the online content was always a plan, but I just never had the time to devote to these tasks. So in a way, I guess the pandemic is kind of a blessing, or at least has put a little bit of fire underneath me to get these other elements of my business going. And I know a lot of people say, when in business, as an entrepreneur, you should have 7 streams of income. So you're not putting your eggs all in one basket. So this is my way of just starting to spread out my offering and make it so I have more passive income, because there's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so many hours that people are able to take time for a class. So I had an appendix rupture a few years ago that put me out of commission. And that was kind of a big realization that, I was the business, which essentially made me realize that really I'm only offering a service, and a business is something that can truly run on its own, or that you could pass over to someone. And I had realized that I had really taken on, I had some assistants in Toronto and I had interns, but I didn't delegate enough or build the business initially to be able to have it sustainable and run on its own. So that has been what I have prioritized during this past year or so, was to moving forward, being more proactive as opposed to reactive. I never really planned out my business as properly as I should have, but now I feel like I'm really building a structure that will sustain the test of time, whether in person or, if something happens to our digital world, we have the in-person. If something happens once again and we get locked down, fingers crossed that doesn't happen, we have the digital. So I'm really trying to be smart and kind of plan ahead, I think, is key. But what I have done in the meantime, in between lockdowns, we have had people come from outside of North Bay to do a 2-day, 5-day, or 10-day intensive. So the one-on-ones have been possible to do, and just really looking forward to starting up as of, today. I feel like we all woke up with a little bit of hope again. So I'm really looking forward to getting more groups in here again. So I just encourage you all to kind of keep tabs on Art and Soul Facebook or Instagram, or feel free to reach out and get the link to any future classes or events, to join our newsletter, because there will be a lot of exciting things to come. And I feel like we're just finally getting there. It's been a long road, but I haven't lost hope. And once again, I'm just excited to be able to share all this with all of you today. So thank you, and like to open it to any questions if anyone has anything to add.
I think this is fantastic, Jennifer. I applaud you, because being in business is not easy. And you're very creative, obviously. And can you share, I'm wondering, we had talked earlier about doing a workshop for women to the power of 10, or doing an introduction to leather craft. Maybe I'll put out a Google form and see if people are interested, but they can still book through your website as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would really love to do something. I used to have this workshop called Shoemaking 101, and I would have all these parts and pieces where you could see the inside of a shoe cut up and try out the equipment. And it was a quick 2-hour workshop that gave you an overview that, you know, even gave students the chance to bring in existing shoes to be like, is something like this possible? And just ask questions in a casual atmosphere. So maybe something like that with the group would
That sounds good. What do you think, everybody? Would you like to try that out?
So Jennifer, what would the average cost be to build a pair of shoes? Just an average. I know it's probably a wide range, but
yeah, so very wide range. So the group workshops are obviously more cost effective. So those workshops would range anywhere from $75 up to $575. And what that price difference would be is the complexity of your project and the amount of time. So the $575 would be like 10 sessions, totaling essentially like 45 hours worth of in-studio time. A 75 would be like a half a day. And then our intensives range from anywhere from 500 up to 3,000, depending on, again, the 3,000 is the 10-day commitment. All materials are always included. So there really is, I try and do the biggest like bracket possible, and have a little something for everyone. So that's something to keep your eyes peeled for, because the baby shoes, and we do Minodier clutches and sandals and clogs and espadrilles and moccasins. All those are, doable and less time and financial commitment. So those are the fun ones to get started on, and then work your way up if you really catch the shoemaking bug.
Okay. Jennifer, can we make just a moment, Bonnie, can we make a site visit? Can you give us your hours when you're open?
So I'm very flexible. So it is by appointment only. So we can coordinate a time that works for the group, and that you prefer.
Okay.
So
definitely we were doing, the group doesn't know this yet, but we're going to do kind of an aventura and do a downtown earthen nest businesses, because we've got 55 businesses now. And I'm really hoping that you would consider, being a client to a business that is trying to do better, eco-age friendly wise, best practices. So I thought, what better way than to go and actually be there and see the business and meet the owners. What do you think? You like that?
I love it.
So. Okay. This will be during Love Month, of course, right? Love Month, love yourself. That's first.
That's right. That's for sure.
Okay. Any questions? Sorry, Bonnie, go ahead.
My question is advertising for your business. Like, are you on, say, like 101 Experiences in Northern Ontario, where, you would be part of those groups that have unique things to offer? Or how would you offer those businesses, this business, like say in Toronto? Are you going to pair maybe with a hotel or something that you could do a getaway? I'm just wondering if you've got some unique things you're thinking of.
Bonnie, I'm really pleased you brought out 101 experiences. They just came on as an Earth and an S business. So you've got this chance now to connect with them too.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And actually, I'm the name of the founder is slipping my mind right now, but she has reached out to me, and we've just kind of been on a bit of a standstill just because, in person and whatnot. And I truly feel like, as much as the digital age is wonderful for connection, like this craft is such a touch and feel kind of thing. So we've been just on pause, but looking forward to collaborating with them, and looking forward to just collaborating with a lot of unique businesses. Like I find the whole juxtaposition when you collaborate with a business that's unexpected is pretty interesting. And like a lot of, beauty comes from that. In the past, I collaborated with Buick, the car company, and we did this media event with them, and they had us design shoes out of the leather that they used for their car interiors. And we ended up turning it into a media event, and that was something unique. And that's kind of got me thinking on out of the box and pairing, with local, like I said, for the future retreats, pairing or partnering with the local boutiques and really unique stays. Or, we're lucky, beside our studio is 315 Algonquin. So it's right near Homewood Suites and then the Days Inn. So depending on your price point, you have a hotel within 2-minute walk. But a lot of our clients do stay at Airbnbs because they're here for 5 or 10 days. And in that case, in the summer, we've promoted the Finch, the Buffalo Farm. So if people are looking for a really creative stay, they can tailor that. So right now I've only been able to do one-on-one, but once the lockdowns officially lift, hopefully that's today and it stays this way, I'm looking to bring groups at a time so that I can actually plan and promote and have, cater the itinerary to a group. And with those numbers, there'll be so many more possibilities to be able to tackle.
Wow. So Jennifer, I have the contact information for 101 experience. It's going to be on earthandannest.ca.
Yeah.
And we now have Earth and a Nest has Facebook and Instagram. And you can go on and join as an Earth and a Nest business and promote your workshops, okay?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, perfect. Appreciate that.
Okay. It's 9:59. We're going to have to close. I've got an appointment to go to, but I want to thank you, Jennifer. Wish you the very, very best in our community. And I think we're so lucky to have you here. It's just amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite today. This was really special, and I look forward to meeting you all in person.
Yeah, I will call you later on today or tomorrow, Jen, and we'll get this organized, okay? For a
Perfect.
visit? Okay, wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
One.